Cody Thompson walked into Judge Judy's courtroom like he owned the place. The 22-year-old had an arrogance about him that was almost palpable. His shoulders were thrown back, and his eyes were full of smug confidence. He wasn't just any young man, he was the son of the local police chief, and that fact alone made him feel untouchable. To Cody, the courtroom wasn't a place of law, it was just a TV show. A mere formality. And Cody wasn't just used to getting away with things, he expected it. His last name alone made him think he could defy the rules and still come out on top. His father's badge was his shield, and no one could break through it, not even Judge Judy. As the court session began, Cody sat down with a mocking smirk plastered across his face. He glanced around the room, noting the subtle glances from the courtroom staff. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone knew he was the police chief's son. And that's exactly how Cody liked it. He thrived on the attention, and he expected special treatment because of it. When the charges were read against him, Cody couldn't help but laugh. They seemed insignificant, almost laughable. He turned to his lawyer and whispered, "What's the point of this? It's just a show." He thought he could coast through this like he had with every other problem in his life. He had never faced real consequences, and today was no different. Or so he thought. Judge Judy was still as a statue, her expression unreadable. But as Cody continued his disrespectful commentary, mocking the seriousness of the charges, the air in the room grew thick with tension. Cody's loud, defiant tone filled the courtroom. "Is this even real? Judge Judy, this is just TV, right?" His words were full of sarcasm and disdain, as if the whole situation didn't matter to him at all. And for a moment, it seemed like no one was paying attention to Cody. But Judge Judy was listening. She wasn't fazed by his insults, and she certainly wasn't going to let his behavior slide. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as she sat there, almost motionless, her gaze fixed on Cody. She wasn't reacting with anger or outrage. She was simply watching him carefully, like a predator sizing up its prey. The tension grew with each second that passed. Cody, still confident and cocky, had no idea what was coming next. He believed that his father's position would be enough to protect him, and in his mind, this was all a joke. But Judge Judy had one rule. Nobody gets special treatment in her courtroom, not even the son of a police chief. Hit that like button if you think no one is above the law, no matter who their father is. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. The tension was palpable, and the audience knew something was about to happen. Cody's arrogance had set the stage, and now it was only a matter of time before Judge Judy would strike. Would his father's influence save him? Or was his disrespect about to cost him everything? Spoiler, it won't. As Cody Thompson continued to mock the court and disrespect the proceedings, Judge Judy Sheindlin remained eerily calm. Her expression was unreadable, her demeanor one of quiet authority. Unlike the typical judge who might react with indignation or frustration, Judge Judy had seen it all before. This was just another entitled young man thinking he could outsmart the system. But there was a reason Judge Judy had been on TV for decades. And that reason was her unshakable ability to remain calm in the face of arrogance, defiance, and disrespect. She was never rattled. As Cody's loud voice echoed through the courtroom, belittling the seriousness of the charges, Judge Judy didn't flinch. Not once. She had dealt with thousands of defendants, some cockier than others, but Cody's arrogance was different. He thought his father's badge would protect him, that no matter what happened in court, he was untouchable. But Judge Judy had one rule. No one, not even the son of a police chief, was above the law. While the audience might have been on edge, waiting for her to react, Judge Judy's calm presence served as a stark contrast to Cody's ever-growing smugness. She didn't need to raise her voice, didn't need to gesture dramatically. Her power was in her presence, her ability to control the room with nothing more than a glance. Cody, still too caught up in his belief that he was invincible, continued to talk down to the court, mocking Judge Judy as if she were some minor obstacle in his way. "This is a joke, right?" Cody said, still addressing the courtroom as if it were a comedy sketch. "Judge Judy, you're just a TV judge. I could walk out of here and no one would care." Judge Judy, however, was not amused. She didn't need to respond to Cody's mocking words. She didn't need to raise her voice or argue with him. Her silence was a weapon, one that would prove far more effective than any words could ever be. The courtroom grew tense. You could feel the shift in the air. The tension was palpable. Cody had been pushing his luck. He had been disrespectful from the start, sure, but this was different. Now, he was mocking Judge Judy's authority, and that was a line he couldn't afford to cross. Judge Judy simply sat there, letting Cody's arrogance fill the space between them, letting his cocky statements hang in the air. She was calculating, assessing the situation. She was giving him the rope to hang himself with. She had seen his type before, the arrogant, entitled young man who thought the system was something to be manipulated, not respected. But what Cody didn't realize was that Judge Judy had a supernatural ability to see through lies, arrogance, and manipulation. She could tell that Cody wasn't just a defendant. He was a bully, someone who had learned that if he pushed hard enough, the world would back down. But in her courtroom, no one could push harder than her. The more Cody talked, the more he revealed himself. He was underestimating Judge Judy, thinking that because he had gotten away with things in the past, he could do the same here. But Judge Judy was no one's fool. Her eyes narrowed just slightly as she listened to him speak. She didn't interrupt. She didn't shout. She simply watched. Cody, still basking in his delusion that he could say whatever he wanted without consequence, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on his face. The tension in the courtroom mounted as his dismissive words continued, each one pushing the limits of decency. Judge Judy's stillness was unnerving. She wasn't just another judge who would tolerate disrespect. She was Judge Judy, the woman who had brought countless arrogant people to their knees in her courtroom, and Cody was about to learn that his arrogance wouldn't save him. She had seen through his act long before he even realized how badly he had crossed the line. The rest of the courtroom was on edge now. The staff stood quietly. The audience was holding their breath, and even the bailiff was watching closely. Everyone could feel it. The moment of truth was approaching, and it was clear that Judge Judy wasn't about to let this disrespect slide. It was only a matter of time before she struck. Tease the moment of truth. What happens next will leave Cody with a reality check he never saw coming. Judge Judy is a seasoned professional, and it's not just about the case at hand anymore. It's about justice, accountability, and showing Cody that no amount of privilege will protect him. It's time for him to find out what happens when arrogance meets a seasoned judge who isn't afraid to take action. And trust me, you won't believe what happens next. As the courtroom sat in tense silence, Cody Thompson's cocky confidence grew with every passing second. He could feel the eyes on him, the whispers behind his back, but it didn't matter. He was the son of the police chief, and he believed that nothing could touch him. The more he spoke, the more arrogant he became. Cody leaned forward, a mocking smile on his face, and with a loud scoff, he turned to Judge Judy and launched into his next verbal assault. "What are you, like 80?" he sneered, shaking his head as if the very idea of Judge Judy sitting in judgment was laughable. "You don't even get what's going on anymore, do you?" he continued, waving his hand dismissively. "Maybe it's time for you to retire, 'cause this court, this whole thing is a joke." The words hung in the air, sharp and biting. Judge Judy remained completely still, her expression unchanged. Cody thought he had her cornered, that his insults would throw her off balance. But the truth was, he was only digging his own hole. He continued to taunt her, the smugness radiating from him like a beacon. "Honestly, Judge, you're so far out of touch, you couldn't even tell what real justice looks like." Cody's tone was dripping with disrespect, as though he believed Judge Judy, A woman who had spent over 25 years presiding over the toughest cases in the country, was incapable of understanding anything outside of her own generation. But Judge Judy didn't flinch. She wasn't bothered by his jabs, they didn't faze her, and they certainly didn't intimidate her. Instead, she sat there, perfectly poised, calculating her response with surgical precision. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to make any grand gestures. She watched him, allowing his arrogance to swell with every insult he threw her way. Cody was relentless, completely unaware that he was pushing Judge Judy closer to the point of no return. He continued his tirade, now belittling her authority, mocking the very idea that someone like her could hold power in his world. "I'm not going to sit here and listen to you lecture me, Judge." He looked around the courtroom, smirking at the few who dared to look at him. "What's the worst you're going to do? Huh? You're just a TV personality." The air in the room felt thicker with every word that left his mouth. The audience, initially shocked by his bravado, began to realize that this wasn't just any defendant in a courtroom. It was someone who believed he could do whatever he wanted, simply because of his last name. He continued to mock the court, completely oblivious to the fact that Judge Judy had not once raised her voice or reacted in any visible way. To him, that was just another sign that she was weak, that she didn't have the power to put him in his place. But he was wrong. So wrong. As Cody took a breath, preparing for his next jab, Judge Judy finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 1,000 decisions, the kind of voice that demanded respect. "You are mistaken if you think this courtroom is a place for jokes, Mr. Thompson." Her words were slow, deliberate, and cold as ice. Cody's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, but he quickly recovered, thinking he could brush it off. After all, what was one comment from some old lady in a courtroom? Nothing to worry about, right? Judge Judy didn't give him the satisfaction of a retort. She wasn't going to meet him where he was. Instead, she simply let him continue, knowing full well that every word he spoke was another misstep that would ultimately lead to his downfall. The tension in the room escalated. It was no longer just about Cody's defiant behavior. It was about a young man who believed his entitlement would let him walk away unscathed. It was about respect, accountability, and the understanding that no one, not even the police chief's son, could escape the law when they so blatantly disrespected it. The audience could feel the rising heat, the anticipation of what was about to unfold. Cody's mocking had gone too far, and Judge Judy was about to show him exactly what happens when arrogance meets its match. His jabs and insults weren't just minor offenses anymore. They were a direct challenge to her authority, to the very institution she had spent her life upholding. And now, the moment of truth was coming. Cody, in his arrogance, still didn't see the trap closing in on him. The more he escalated, the more he sealed his fate. He kept digging deeper, thinking that Judge Judy, like so many others before her, would eventually back down, would be intimidated by his cocky attitude. But he couldn't have been more wrong. Judge Judy wasn't just going to stand by and let this continue. She had dealt with bigger egos, more arrogant people who thought they were untouchable, and she knew exactly how to dismantle them. It wasn't going to be about insults. It wasn't going to be about shouting or making a scene. It was going to be about shutting him down, not with anger, but with a quiet, unshakable authority that only someone like her could possess. Cody Thompson's arrogance had been building for minutes, each jab and insult pushing him further down a path he couldn't return from. The tension in the courtroom had reached a boiling point. Judge Judy had sat there, watching him, allowing him to expose his complete lack of respect for the very institution he was in. But now, Cody's words weren't just mocking or disrespectful. They were personal, crossing a line that no one, least of all Judge Judy, could allow to pass without consequence. With a smug grin still plastered on his face, Cody leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with even more defiance. He looked Judge Judy up and down, as though he were analyzing her every flaw, as if she were nothing more than an old woman who had no place in his world. "You're just an angry old woman, Judge," Cody sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You don't understand justice. You've been sitting on that bench for way too long. You're out of touch." The words hung in the air for a moment, and it felt like the entire courtroom had taken a collective breath. The audience, who had been silently watching, felt the shift, the room now charged with something much more dangerous than before. Cody had made the fatal mistake of not just attacking the court, but attacking Judge Judy personally. This was no longer just about an entitled young man spouting off. No, Cody had gone too far. As the words left his mouth, he barely noticed the shift in Judge Judy's demeanor. Her calm, controlled expression remained for a split second, but her eyes, those famous eyes, narrowed just slightly. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she let the silence fill the room. The air seemed to thicken, as if the very atmosphere was waiting for her to respond. And then, without a word, she leaned forward, her body language changing. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rage. It was something much more controlled, much more dangerous. It was calm before the storm. Cody, in his arrogance, still hadn't realized the gravity of what he had just done. He was too busy patting himself on the back for getting under her skin, for having the audacity to mock a woman who, in his mind, had no real power. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Judge Judy wasn't rattled. Not one bit. She wasn't upset. She wasn't even bothered. She had been waiting for this moment. She knew exactly what Cody was, entitled, arrogant, spoiled, and with a complete disregard for authority. And now he was going to learn a lesson he would never forget. With the same controlled, almost eerie calm, Judge Judy straightened in her chair, her eyes locking onto Cody with a gaze so sharp it felt like it could cut through steel. For the first time she spoke, but it wasn't in the raised voice of someone angry. It was cold, methodical, and absolutely unforgiving. "You think you can come into my courtroom and disrespect me like this?" she asked, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of 1,000 judgments. "You think just because you have some badge or some name you can talk to me like that?" Cody's smirk faltered for the first time. He opened his mouth, probably to say something else, but Judge Judy didn't give him the chance. She didn't need to raise her voice, didn't need to throw him out of the courtroom. Her controlled fury was enough. It was a quiet storm, but a storm nonetheless. "Let me make this clear, young man," she continued, her voice cutting through the air. "This courtroom is not a joke. And I am not some angry old woman you can belittle." The shift in Cody's demeanor was almost immediate. He had underestimated Judge Judy, thinking her to be a relic of the past, someone who wouldn't be able to stand up to his modern arrogance. But now, as her words landed, he could feel the walls closing in around him. His confidence, his bravado, all of it started to crumble. For the first time, he began to realize that this wasn't just a TV show, and he wasn't going to get away with his behavior. Not in Judge Judy's courtroom. But even then, he was still too far gone. His arrogance had blinded him to the storm he had unleashed. He was completely unaware that the moment he had insulted Judge Judy personally, he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. It was no longer about the case, it was about the disrespect. And now, it was a matter of justice. Real justice, the kind that had no tolerance for people like Cody. The tension in the room was at its peak. The audience was still silent, but you could almost hear their collective breath. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone could feel it in the air. Cody's arrogance had finally met its match. And Judge Judy, in her calm and composed way, was about to deliver the lesson of a lifetime. Tease the consequence. Cody had no idea how badly he had messed up. He thought he could insult Judge Judy, thinking his privilege would protect him, but he was dead wrong. What happens next will shatter his world, and it will make every viewer realize that no one, no matter their status or name, is beyond the reach of justice. The courtroom fell into an eerie silence as Judge Judy, now fully in control of the proceedings, slowly leaned forward. Her gaze, still sharp and unwavering, never left Cody's face. He had crossed the line. There was no doubt about that. And now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Judge Judy took a deep breath, as though she were savoring the moment. She had seen this before, the arrogance, the entitlement, the belief that power could protect someone from the consequences of their actions. But Cody had made a grave mistake. This wasn't his father's precinct, and no badge could shield him here. "Mr. Thompson, you have made a mockery of this courtroom," Judge Judy began, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of years of experience. "From the moment you entered this court, you have shown nothing but disrespect, not just to me, but to the very institution of justice." Cody shifted uneasily in his seat, his cocky smile now replaced with the faintest hint of nervousness. He was starting to realize that the safety net he had always relied on, the name, the badge, was no match for the judgment of Judge Judy. "You are the son of the police chief," she continued, her tone cold and methodical, "and I have no doubt that you've used that to your advantage, skating by without ever facing the consequences of your actions. But that ends today." Judge Judy paused, allowing her words to sink in. The audience could feel the tension rise. They knew this was going to be big. They had been waiting for this moment, for the inevitable consequence of Cody's unchecked arrogance. And it was coming. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed slightly. "You think your name gives you power in this courtroom? You think the law doesn't apply to you because your father wears a badge? Well, let me show you just how wrong you are." The silence was deafening. Cody, who had walked into this courtroom thinking he could easily skate by, was now realizing that he was about to face something he hadn't prepared for, a historic punishment. If you think entitlement shouldn't get in the way of justice, smash that like button. You won't believe what happens next. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of her final decision. "I am going to make an example of you, Mr. Thompson. This behavior cannot be tolerated. You will leave here today with a lesson that will stay with you for the rest of your life." The room seemed to hold its breath. Cody's face drained of color as the realization hit him. His father's influence couldn't save him now. The arrogance, the defiance, it had all led him to this moment. He had no escape. The law was about to take its course, and it was going to be something that no one in that courtroom would forget. Cody had always assumed that his name would protect him, that he could say whatever he liked and get away with it. But Judge Judy wasn't done yet. She wasn't about to let him off the hook. Cody Thompson's confidence crumbled in an instant. He had walked into the courtroom with the arrogance of someone who believed he was untouchable, that his father's badge would shield him from any consequences. But now, as Judge Judy's final judgment loomed over him, the weight of his actions came crashing down. The reality of his situation hit him like a freight train. His face went pale, and his smug expression faded into shock and panic. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Cody began to realize that he was not going to get away with this. The sense of invincibility that had shielded him for so long shattered in front of him. His father's badge, his privilege, was useless here. "Wait a minute." Cody blurted out, his voice frantic. "I didn't mean it. I'm sorry, Judge. Please, you don't have to do this. My father will." Judge Judy didn't let him finish. She raised her hand slightly, signaling for him to stop talking. There was no longer any room for pleading. No amount of apologies or excuses could change what had already been set in motion. Her eyes were unwavering, as cold and piercing as ever. "It's too late for apologies, Mr. Thompson. You had your chance, and you chose to waste it." Her voice carried the weight of 1,000 decisions, and Cody, who had once been so cocky, was now sitting there broken, a mere shell of the arrogant young man who had mocked her just moments ago. The audience could feel the shift. Cody's entitlement had blinded him to the reality of the law. He thought he could talk down to Judge Judy, mock her authority, and walk out unscathed. But now he was facing the full force of justice, and it wasn't going to be easy. Judge Judy then addressed the entire courtroom, her voice calm but full of authority. making sure everyone in the room understood the gravity of this moment. "Let this be a lesson to everyone here," she began, her gaze sweeping across the room, ensuring she had the attention of every person present. "No one is above the law, not even the son of the police chief. No badge, no family name, no status can shield you from the consequences of your actions when you break the law. And no one, not even you, Mr. Thompson, gets to walk away without facing the consequences of their disrespect." The room was still. The weight of her words hung in the air like a thunderstorm waiting to break. The message was clear. Arrogance and entitlement would not be tolerated in her courtroom, no matter who you were. Judge Judy took a deep breath before continuing. "This case isn't just about Mr. Thompson. It's about the principle of accountability. It's about reminding everyone that no one, not even those with power or influence, is immune to the law. And today, Mr. Thompson, you will be the one to bear the consequences of your actions. You will learn what happens when arrogance meets accountability." Cody's head hung low as he processed what Judge Judy had just said. His entitlement had led him to believe he could get away with anything, but now he was forced to reckon with the true cost of arrogance. It wasn't just about the punishment he would face in the courtroom. This was going to affect every aspect of his life. Judge Judy's words echoed in Cody's mind as she laid out the consequences. He would lose much more than just a case today. He would lose the privilege that had defined him, his reputation, his future prospects, his relationship with his father. Everything was about to be ruined. "Your actions today will follow you for the rest of your life," Judge Judy declared, her voice firm. "This will be on your record, and it will shape how you are seen by everyone moving forward. Your name won't be enough to protect you anymore. Your father's influence won't protect you from the consequences of your behavior." Cody's realization deepened. This was more than just a courtroom moment. It was a turning point in his life. His entire future was now in jeopardy. He had been so sure of his entitlement, but now he saw the real cost of his arrogance. It wasn't just about a fine or a slap on the wrist. It was about the damage he had done to his future, to his reputation, and to his relationships. The audience could feel it, the weight of justice finally sinking into Cody's mind. This was no longer just a young man making mistakes. This was a lesson about accountability, humility, and the real consequences of taking things too far. Cody would leave this courtroom with more than just a ruling. He would leave with the realization that no one is untouchable, and nobody escapes the law, no matter who their father is. The courtroom had fallen silent once again, but this time it was different. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of finality, a moment of reckoning that would reverberate for a long time to come. Cody Thompson, once so confident, so sure of his privilege, was now being escorted out of the courtroom by the bailiffs. His head was low, his once cocky swagger completely gone. The young man who had walked in thinking he could get away with anything now realized that everything had changed. As the doors of the courtroom swung open, Cody glanced back one last time. He had expected to walk out as the winner. After all, what could a TV judge really do to someone like him? But now, all he could feel was the weight of humiliation. His arrogance had cost him everything. He wasn't just leaving with a judgment against him. He was leaving with a lesson that no one, not even his father's badge, could ever undo. The man who thought he was untouchable had been crushed under the weight of his own disrespect. Outside the courtroom, the world that Cody had once taken for granted was slipping through his fingers. His phone rang constantly, his father's number flashing on the screen, but even his father couldn't fix this. Cody had underestimated the law. He had thought that the same arrogance that had gotten him through life would carry him through this moment. But now he was realizing the truth. Entitlement does not protect you from the law. For Cody, his life as he knew it was over. His father's influence could no longer shield him. He was no longer the untouchable son of a powerful police chief. Now he was just a man who had made a series of unforgivable mistakes, and the world would remember him for them. He would have to face the consequences, a hard truth that he had been running from for so long. The high-flying life he'd lived was shattered in an instant, and there was no going back. If you believe justice always finds a way to balance the scales, make sure you subscribe for more stories where arrogance meets its match. As Cody's figure disappeared down the courthouse hall, the rest of the courtroom was left in stunned silence. There was a sense of closure in the air, but also a quiet reflection on what had just unfolded. For all of the power Cody had thought he had, for all the advantages he believed his name gave him, he was now facing something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. The truth about the law, and how no one could escape it when they let arrogance blind them to their own downfall. Judge Judy, who had spent the entire case watching this young man's belly of arrogance slowly collapse, sat back in her chair. Her decision had been made, and the lesson had been delivered. Justice had been served, not just to Cody, but to anyone watching. Arrogance meets its match when it comes up against real accountability. But the lesson was not just for Cody, it was for all of us. Judge Judy didn't just deliver a ruling. She delivered a moment that would be remembered for a long time. The way she showed restraint, how she allowed Cody's own words to seal his fate, how she used calm authority to dismantle his bravado piece by piece. This was a reminder that respect and humility are the foundation of justice. As the video neared its end, the message became crystal clear. No one is above the law. Not even the son of a police chief, not even someone who thinks their entitlement will carry them through life without consequences. Cody thought he was invincible. He thought his name, his father's influence, and his arrogance would protect him from the truth. But he learned the hardest lesson of all. The law is blind, and justice has a way of catching up with those who think they can escape it. The screen fades as the final message appears. No one is untouchable. No one escapes the law. Respect is earned, not given. And remember, arrogance may win battles, but it never wins the war.